Welcome to Answering God's Call. I'm your host, Stanley Ermov. Our theme for this show is taken from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18, which says, "We fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." In this show, we invite religious and priests to share the story of their call and their life of service to God and His people, in the hope that their story will lead us to better understand that while it's good to appreciate the good things of this life, our first priority should be pursuing the things of heaven. Our guest today is Sister Mary Emmanuel of the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity, S.O.L.T, as we know it in Belize.
Yes.
Welcome, Sister Emmanuel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sister, could you tell us about your growing up years, your family, environment, and schooling through to your teens?
Sure. It's actually really providential that I'm here sharing this with you because my vocation really was a fruit of the mission of Belize and Benke especially. But before I came, when I was 23 years old, my background is I'm from Minnesota, and my parents were both raised on dairy farms, and they're both Catholic, from very strong Catholic families, and so that was my heritage. I received a strong Catholic identity. So that meant I learned my prayers. We said prayers before we went to bed. We said meal prayers. All of our sacraments were celebrated with great joy and festivities, and grandparents were invited, and we would have cake. And so for every sacrament, it was a big family occasion. So I always knew what the Catholic Church was. But I would say it wasn't until I went to college. I went to the College of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, Minnesota, where I was kind of set free and I could choose the faith on my own. So I was 3 hours from home, and I was going for a social work degree, and it was the first time I could choose if I was going to go to Sunday Mass or not. Because at home it was kind of like, it was a rule, we're going to Sunday Mass.
And what decisive age was that?
Yeah, so then I was 18 when I first went to college.
Okay, I call 12 the breakout years. For guys anyway, we want to drop everything at 12. Yeah. Now, where you live, was that a large community or a farming community or a city?
Community, yeah.
Farming community, so very close-knit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad was a mechanic, fixed tractors, and my mom's a nurse. So they're both very hardworking. And,
all right.
Yeah, and I'm the second oldest of 9, so there's 9 of us. 9 children, so a big family.
So were you drawn to any of those professions? Not the mechanic, but the nursing maybe? I
thought about being like FBI agent. That was one option. Or I wanted to do something adventurous, so I would think like police officer, or then girls kind of go through this phase where they like animals. So I was like, I'll be a veterinarian. And then I wanted to save the world, and so I'll be a doctor.
Okay.
So I actually did start with pre-med my first year, but then after all the hours in lab, I cannot do this. And I didn't like blood, so that was a problem. But so then I settled for social work because that's you help the needy, you help the poor, it's a very helping profession.
Now, is this before 18 or after 18?
This was when I got to college.
When you got to college. So the breakout years, there was no breaking out for you. You just continued your religious tradition?
Yeah, I did. I didn't stray far.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. So what, 4 years in college typically?
4 years in college, and a part of that whole time was definitely my dating life. So I had a boyfriend through high school, and then when I got to college, I was definitely, part of the plan was to find the one. I was going to find Prince Charming, and he was going to be perfect. So that was very much ingrained in me as a young girl, that part of my future and my happiness was that I was going to find the perfect one. So in high school, I definitely had a very wonderful boyfriend, then a really not so great boyfriend. I think everybody kind of not everybody, but sometimes you hit that where it's just like you have someone that's just like bad news, and like everyone's like no. And then in college, I started to date a young man. His name was John Olson, and he was just like, this was the one, and he was Catholic, and he was funny, and he liked me, that was like the best part, is he liked me, and he was a baseball player. He was really just a special person. So we dated all 4 years in college. So that was kind of like what I thought life was going to be, that we would marry. Yeah. And then my senior year in college, I got to thinking, well, if we get married, then I'm not going to be able to do like adventurous things, so I better do that now. So I started thinking about the Peace Corps. And then I was looking into Peace Corps, and I realized that Jesus really wasn't a part of their mission. It was definitely to help people, but it wasn't Christian-based. So I found that was advertised on our campus ministry was this opportunity to volunteer in Benque Viejo in Belize. And
where is that?
And that is just down the road, 2 hours. So, yeah. So I mean, not even knowing where that was or what that, I just thought this is an opportunity, and I can go and I can serve, do something exciting before we get married and have children, and I should do it now.
But then I hear you say, you try to connect Jesus with what you'll be doing prior to getting married. How did that come into it? How did Jesus come into this?
I think that because the times that I struggled in my life, struggled in teenage years, prayer was always something that brought me joy and brought me back. So I would have, for example, in high school, the parish would bring in something called Net Ministries. And I remember those retreats as being very high points of joy in my high school years. And so then going into college when, like, for example, the boyfriend that was the bad boyfriend, breaking up with him and how hard that was, I turned to Jesus.
Oh, that wasn't a good boyfriend experience when you turned to Jesus.
The first one, yeah.
I see.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, so Jesus was just always there for me, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did that continue or?
It did.
Yeah, that means you kind of like put marriage, the idea of marriage, on the shelf a while?
No, I still married. So I met John, so 4 years in college, but Jesus was still a part of, we would pray together before meals, we would go to Mass together. So that was definitely, I thought this is going to be a really good fit.
Good.
Yeah. And so I tried to convince him to come to Belize with me, but he actually had already had an experience abroad. He'd been to Spain, and he's like, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to work and get a job. And you go and do that, and then we'll get engaged and we'll get married. And so that was the plan.
All right. No, that seemed to me a very clear, specific, direct, definitive course. What happened? You chose Jesus. How did that happen?
So I came to Belize, and I was surrounded with some people my own age who had this deep love for the Catholic Church that I hadn't seen in college.
This was what, early 20s?
Yeah, I was 21 when I came, 22. And so witnessing these young women, young men, like wanting to pray the rosary and wanting to go to Mass, and I was kind of like, well, I knew what those things were, but that was more like for grandma and grandpa. That was more for the elderly. But these people my age loved Jesus in the Eucharist, and they would talk about going to Holy Adoration, and I was like, what is that?
This is Benque?
This is in Benque, yeah.
Whoa.
So that really inspired me to have, even though I had my boyfriend, I had John, when a cute guy would say, hey, you want to pray the rosary? You're just like, all right, yeah, I'll pray the rosary with you. So it was just a different environment. And one of the young ladies that I live with, she said, what do you think God wants you to do with your life? I was like, what do you mean? Like, most people ask you, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with your life? What do you want? You hear that your whole life. And so I was like, I don't think I've ever asked God what he wants me to do. She said, I think you should ask him. So I started to pray about that, and this kind of restlessness started to stir in my heart, and questions of, what if John isn't the one? And what if I'm meant to serve and he doesn't want to come with me? Like, this is the rest of my life. Maybe we're not on the same path together. Maybe he's not the one. Maybe I'm just supposed to be a missionary. So I remember it was during Lent.
Coming from that question.
Yeah.
What do you think God wants?
What does God want? Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so that year, the fourth formers were going on a retreat, and I was asked to come and help be a chaperone. So I remember going, and they were like, all the girls are going to go to confession. And I really I don't think I'd gone to confession in years, really, even though I've been raised Catholic, but I didn't have that understanding of the sacrament. So I was like, well, they're all going, I should be a good witness. I'll go to confession too. So that's where it happened. So I went, and I confessed my sins, and then I said, Father, if you think you're supposed to do something and you don't do it, is that a sin? And he was quiet, and then he started talking about religious life and sisters and how beautiful it is. And I said, Father, I have a boyfriend. And he said, don't worry about him. And I just started to cry because I knew.
This is in the confessional.
Yes, because in that moment, and I can't explain because it wasn't in words, I knew that Jesus wanted me for his own. But at that time, I couldn't have said that's what this means. I had no concept. I just knew he wants me for his own. So when I left the confessional, I thought, oh no, kind of, oh. And I remember it was Father Tony Blunt. And I said, well, there's this thing called the seal of confession. He can't talk to me about what happened. And I can pretend that I don't know what just happened. So I will just kind of stay away from Father Tony and just pretend nothing happened. Although when I left the confessional, I cried, but there was this understanding, like I knew, I was like, this is it. This is what that restlessness is. And so, but then I was afraid. So I thought, I will pretend nothing happened. So I tried that, but I was miserable. So then I started to pray. I'm like, Jesus, if you really want me to do this, you have to make it very clear, because I'm not breaking up with John unless you make it very, very, very clear. So that was my telling God what to do. And so what happened was one day I went into our apartment where I was living, and I walked in and the wind blew and a holy card fell on my foot. And I picked up the card, and it was a novena to the Infant of Prague, which it's an image of Jesus as a little boy. And I was like, what's this? I don't even know who he is. And I prayed it, and it said, you say your intention, you say this prayer, and you do it not for 9 days, for 9 hours. Every hour, and the hour for 9 hours. And I was like, well, I know what I want to pray for. So, but I kind of put the card away.
9 hours continually?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I thought, well, this will be, I can get a fast answer this way. So one day I said, okay, I started in the morning. And so I said my little intention, Jesus, if you really want me to be a sister, you have to make it very, very clear. Your will be done, but please, 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 I don't want to break up with John. That was kind of my whole attitude. But so I did that for 9 hours. So on the 9th hour, I'm in the same place. I'm in our apartment, and I was alone. And I thought, well, this is the 9th hour. Where's my answer? And there's a knock on the door. And one of the volunteers, her boyfriend, comes in. And I thought, well, why is he here? Because she's not here. And he says, so how are you? I'm good. He's like, are you thinking about being a sister? And I was like, why did you ask me that? Because I didn't say anything to anybody. So why did you ask me that? He said, oh, I've just been watching you. You've been praying a lot. And then he started to tell me about his sister, who's a religious sister, and that she's the most joyful person in the whole world. And I was just like, this is not what I wanted to hear.
No.
So my heart wasn't open. So even though I was asking for signs, and this is, I think, if I could share this with everybody, if you want a sign, you first have to pray to be open to what the answer is. Because the thing was, I wasn't open. So the answer came, but I was like, no, I don't want to be a sister. So I just, again, kind of pretended that didn't happen. And then the second experience was I was in the teacher's room where we all have our desks, and somebody walked in with a box of books. They're like, hey, this box of books was donated from the United States. If you want any of the books, go ahead and take them. So the first book I pull out, a little story about the bride of Christ. And I was like, bride of Christ? I never heard the term before. So I start to read it, and it's all about this man telling this story about how his brother's girlfriend broke up with him. She entered the convent and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh no, no, there's another one. So I was like, no. So it was kind of like he was working in my heart, and I was fighting it and seeing how miserable I was. And then probably the last thing that happened that finally was kind of pushed me through was John called me, and he said, what's going on? And I was, what do you mean, what's going on? He said, you wrote me a letter and you spelled my name wrong.
Oops.
And he spelled it Jon, and for whatever reason I wrote John. And so I think he kind of thought I was cheating on him, and I was like, that's not what's happening here. He's like, let me explain. I think I'm supposed to be a sister, and this is what's happening. And where we grew up, nobody was entering. There was none of our friends entered the convent. We were both Catholic, but we didn't know anybody that was accepting a call or even knew that people did anymore. So he was like, I think you're kind of crazy. And I said, but I think I'm called to do this, and I think if I do it, we'll both be blessed. And I remember going home that night just crying because I was like, I don't know if this is the right thing, but Jesus, your will be done. And it hurts, but I accept it. I walked home that night crying, like, but I accept it. I accept this pain for you, Jesus. I accept it. Your will be done. So then I got home, and the next day I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. So it was like I was very like up and down that year. So then finally the Triduum came. It was the end of Lent.
But was John giving you space in making up your mind at this point?
I think he was so confused because we had such a good relationship and we had talked about marriage, and he was just kind of like, why would you just do this? And so he was angry, and I didn't quite know how to deal with the anger, but I knew I couldn't deny what I knew Jesus was calling me to, but I just was so afraid to answer the call, so I was fighting it. And then it was Holy Week. It was Holy Saturday, and I decided I'm going to go talk to Father Tony. So I said, Father Tony, can I talk to you? I said, okay, if I became a sister, what do I do? I have no idea what to do. And he's like, well, you would discern if you're called to contemplative life or active life. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. So he explained it to me, and I was like, okay. And like, well, what are your sisters? These sisters that are here with you, what are they? He's like, well, they're contemplative, active. It's both together. I was like, oh. So
they were sold?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's actually the superior is here today. She's leaving tomorrow, but you could go meet with her today. I said, okay, tell me where she is. So I met with her that day, and I said, she said, how are you? Tell me about yourself. And I was like, oh, sister, I think I'm being called, but I don't know. And she shared with me. She's like, well, if you want to enter, we would receive you. And but then I still fought it though. But what was beautiful that night was Holy Saturday, and I went back to our apartment, and I really felt like I'm going to do this. And I walked in, and there were candles and flowers everywhere. And one of my co-volunteers had decorated for Easter, but I just felt like it was for me. Like he was like, she said yes. So that was really the strong grace that kind of got me through to coming back home from Belize, and then taking the next step to enter. And then I did enter in October that year, 97.
So you had to write a Dear John letter?
So then we had we met together to exchange our things. I give you back this, I give you back this kind of thing. It was awful. But God had worked in his heart, because if he had asked me to stay, I would have stayed. But he said, I can't compete with God. If you're being called to this, then I think you should do it.
Good God.
So, yeah. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So you answered number 2, your call and the challenges and how you overcame them.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, so that's about what, age 22?
Yeah, I was 23 when I entered.
And you entered 23.
Yeah.
All right. And you studied for how many years?
So when I first entered, they decided at the time to start sending the sisters to Rome for the beginning stages of formation. So for me, it was 3 years.
All right.
So I studied there for 3 years with the sisters. And what was really beautiful is that my entrance date was October 7th. And it happened that year to be my parents' 25th wedding anniversary. It fell on that day. And I just thought, you can't plan things like that. That's God.
Okay.
So I just felt like my vocation was a great blessing for my family, is a great blessing for my family too. That was a sign of it.
So what was your parents' response when you told them that you want to be a sister and not married with kids, grandkids, and everything else?
Well, I think one thing was that they had so many children, they weren't so worried about grandchildren, because they knew there's opportunities. But my dad was proud of me. He was in Knights of Columbus and very faithful. So he had a lot of he was very proud. My mom was more like, did I do something wrong that you don't want to be like me? She asked me that. And I said, oh, Mom, she's a beautiful mother. I said, no, it's because Jesus is calling me. And then one of my sister, a year younger than me, she's like, well, just because you're doing this, don't you think that I'm going to follow you and do this too? And I was like, oh, no, I didn't say that. So there's different reactions. Yeah.
So did anybody follow you after all that speech?
No. 6 of them are married now in the church with children.
You're alone.
Others not married.
You and Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. So, what was most meaningful to you in your studies and training to become a sister? Would you say this 3 years in Rome, though?
Yeah,
Rome is quite a place, I would
being in
imagine.
Rome,
No?
yeah, our founder, Father Flanagan, his desire was for us to see the universal church. And so he wanted us to see the Catholic Church is composed of every language and every culture and every, type of expression you can imagine. And so to be in Rome and to see that, to see, every habit, every different color under the sun you see in Rome. And so just to see the richness of the church there was really beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll continue in a moment after a break. Welcome back. During the break, sister, you were saying that you spent 3 years in Rome.
Yes.
In that last year, you took your first vows.
Yes.
Could you tell us what the implication of that first vow is? What does it mean?
So first vows, the 3 years of my formation were more like preparing for the wedding, and then there's 2 years, the second 2 years are like your engagement. So then the vows was like the wedding.
You call it a wedding in S.O.L.T? Really?
It's like a wedding.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So at that ceremony, we received our new name. So I received, my baptismal name is Karen. So when I was a novice, I received the name of Mary. So I was Sister Karen Marie. And then when I took my first vows, you could submit 3 choices, and then our founder would pray about them. And then at that ceremony, you hear, and now you will be called. So I was at that ceremony, and it was in Italian. So I was like, and now you'll be called Sister Mary Emmanuel. So then I had to say my vows, and I, Sister Mary Emmanuel, vowed. So it's a very beautiful and emotional ceremony. Yeah. So that was in Rome.
Anything to share why you chose the name Emmanuel?
Well, I didn't know what to choose. So I did one of those, and I don't recommend this, but I picked up a Bible and I just said, Jesus, what would you like me to be named? And I opened it up and I read, you shall be called breach mender and restorer of streets to be lived in. And I'm like, how will I be Sister Mary breach mender? Like, who ever heard of that? And it didn't make any sense. So I prayed about it. And when I submitted my letter, I explained that story of how I received that scripture. And then I was just in my room and I looked at a book on the wall, and it was by a Sister Mary Emmanuel. And it just caught my attention. And she was a sister that's a bit famous. She comes out of Medjugorje. And I just was drawn to that name. And it really fit with just how in my vocation I've just been very drawn to Jesus in the Eucharist. And he is with us, and it means God is with us. So that really fit with my my personal spirituality. But my 3 choices were Sister Karen Marie, just keep that name, or Sister Mary, because why can't you be just Sister Mary? I'm like, who's it? I just want to be Sister Mary. And then my third one was Sister Mary Emmanuel. So those were my 3 choices.
Good.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And then S.O.L.T was never a question in your mind, because that's where you got exposed to the whole journey.
When I was in Rome, I kind of did things backwards. Most people visit different convents and kind of look that way, but I just felt that God had set me right where I needed to be. And when I was in Rome, I was confirmed in my choice, because I would ask questions to the other sisters, like, tell me about your community, tell me about what you do, tell me how you live together. And then as I was learning about our charism to serve in teams of priests, sisters, and laity, I said, I'm in the right place. And hearing John Paul II was still alive then, we would see him weekly we saw him many, many times. We're blessed to be at a lot of different events that he was at. And what he was saying at those times and what he was writing, I was just like, our community is right in line with everything he's saying. So it just confirmed me that I was in the right place.
Okay.
So.
And then after Rome, what happened?
So then I was assigned to our mission on the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota, which is up on the Canadian border. And I was asked the first year to teach 2nd grade. So I did it. I taught 2nd grade. And then my 2nd year there, I was asked to be the vocations director. And so the women, when they first enter, I would be their first contact, and I would interview, and then I would receive aspirants. They would live with us for 4 months at a time, and I would help them walk through that process. So that was really the remainder of my time there, was as the vocation director.
Yeah. Did we talk about your first vows in year 3? The meaning?
The meaning of
That first vow that you took at the end of the third year.
So that's like the wedding. And then we had 5 years to prepare for final vows.
Yeah.
So the first vow is really...
So that's like an engagement? In the context of marriage, for instance?
It's hard to explain because in those 5 years, you know it's temporary. It's in time. And the final vows... Which means that if you change your mind, that's okay? Yeah. And the wisdom of the church, because she knows how we are, and... It's still a time of testing of the call. And so if a woman felt and discerned that this wasn't for her, then she would have that freedom not to renew her vows and to go home. But after the 5 years, then you can take your final vows, and that goes into eternity. So there's a much more, it's not just for time. It's not a wedding between a man and a woman, it's between you and God, and that relationship goes into eternity. And so the fifth, the final vow, it's much more the wedding. The first vow was a wedding, but the final vow is much more significant because you prostrate, you lay in your stomach, and the saints are called upon, and we receive a ring, we receive our scapular, and there's a lot more symbolism in the ceremony. Yeah. And
you mentioned during the breakthrough that you spent about 9 years working with the Indians. What was that about?
So the Indian reservation, there's different tribes in the United States. This one was Chippewa Métis. So they had a strong history of Catholicism there. They mixed with the French. Okay. And so we have a little Catholic school that the S.O.L.T community started or restarted. St. Anne's was already there. But they had gone into become a government school. They received government funding, and that meant Jesus kind of slowly was taken out of the school. Then it just became really a government school. So then when Father Flanagan went to visit, he's like, we need to start the Catholic school back up. And the Benedictines had been there previous to us. And so the buildings were still there, everything was still there, but we had to just get it back going into the Catholic school. So a very tiny, small school, but that was what our work was there with the people. And still is, we're still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So your second vow was after 5 years.
My final
vow. And that's
vows,
permanent?
Yes. That was in 2006, and I did that on the reservation. Yeah. So my family was able to come, that was so powerful and beautiful for me because they couldn't come to Rome. But they were able to drive up to North Dakota, which was like a 8-hour drive from my hometown. And so my grandparents were there, my family was there, most of my brothers and sisters came, my godparents were there, so it was beautiful. And it was on Our Lady of Guadalupe, December 12th.
Okay.
So.
Good. Realizing this is final and definitive.
Yeah.
You're now married.
Yeah.
For eternity.
Yeah.
We are married for life. You're married for eternity.
Yeah.
Any innermost consciousness in that regard? What was happening inside there?
There was so much preparation that went into that time. I was taken out of mission for 4 months to really specifically prepare. So there's a lot of emotion and a lot of prayer going into it. So then when I was there and I was kneeling, it was at that moment, and the microphone's right here, I got choked up, and I don't know if it was more than a minute. I felt like a very long time, but I couldn't even speak because it was like, this is it. This is it. This is it. And then I finally was able to get it out, and I cried. I cried through it because I knew what I was doing. And there's a sadness of letting go of beautiful things. There's a sadness of letting go of marriage and children. But then there's a joy of there's something very beautiful here as well. So it was just that mix of joy and sorrow all tied up into that moment.
Kind of like more knowing what you're leaving behind, but not really knowing the beauty of what you're entering into.
Yeah.
So a moment of faith and surrender.
It's a big leap of faith.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty. So tell us about your responsibilities as a sister, past and present.
Well, as I said, so North Dakota was my first mission, and that I was mostly in vocation work there. Oh,
that was to reinstitute Catholicism amongst the Indians. Is that a correct description?
The school, yeah. I helped on the school board, and I worked a lot with. They had us in a little bit of everything, but parish missions. But I also did vocation work with the women that were entering our community. So that mission was their first experience living in our convent.
Now, who are the teachers?
The teachers at the school?
Yeah.
We hired local, but we also had volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were the only sister?
And my first year there, I was, yeah.
Okay. So how did you, just quickly, kind of restore, if you like, Catholicism? And what was what approach? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, that's a topical thing in our schools right now, because we're getting, again, outside support, outside funding, and a lot of time with strings attached.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing is that the Holy Spirit had been working far before we got there. So there were people that had deep, deep faith that were already there. And it was kind of like just finding them and bringing them out to help.
These were
build
teachers?
And support the local parishioners,
community members,
deep prayerful people devoted to the Blessed Mother with a deep love for the church. And so when this enthusiasm came out, like, let's start the school, there was a good response of like, yes. But of course, when things are being handed to them free in the public schools, that's what we would struggle against. They'd be handed so many things for free, and then we weren't able to give those things, but we could give the riches of God. And so it was watching when children would go home and help convert their parents, and marriages were being blessed because the parents were learning through their children. Things like that were really what helped the school to continue.
So it was almost like teaching in reverse. Rather than from parents down, it was the children up.
The children would teach
That's
the parents.
seriously interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you're kind of like facing us with a similar situation in Belize. We're trying to figure out how to approach it really. But that's inspirational. The children can actually do that.
Yeah.
Good.
Because they're so open.
And your current responsibilities? You're regional?
Yeah, I was elected to be the regional servant 2 years ago, which means I oversee our houses in the United States, Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. So we're not that big of a community. We do have a region 8 in the Asian region, so in Thailand and Papua New Guinea and the Philippines. And so the superior over me is called the general servant, and she oversees the regions. So I'm in charge of the American region. So I travel and I visit the houses and just...
Meaning what? I mean, on the ground, what does that mean?
It's
like,
your support.
Know, you're in banking.
Yeah, you're a support. You're here to say, how are you doing? What can I do for you?
All right. I thought about that before the show, and I said, maybe you're a soul whisperer.
I'm an encourager. I'm a cheerleader. Like, you can do it. You're doing great.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a soul whisperer. Good. New name. All right. Now, so far we've been focusing on your call and your responsibilities as a sister. And I would like us to go deeper now into your personal life of dedication to God. Yep. But first, I would like to say a few words to our audience. From time to time, I will be using the words intimacy or intimate, referring to a sense of spiritual oneness experienced in a deep and wholesome relationship, in this case with God. An easy way to understand the meaning of intimacy is by the phrase intimacy. That's what intimacy is all about, knowledge, sharing yourself. That's why in marriage we get married. We fall in love and we kind of realize, is this person knows me more than anybody else, and I think he or she loves what she's sharing. Let's spend our life together. It's that intimacy that really turns into, I want to spend my life with you. In St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 12, verses 30 and 31, Jesus tells us that the first great commandment is to love God with our whole heart, our whole soul, our whole mind, and with all our strength. In other words, our first priority in life is to love God. Then Jesus added, the second great commandment, like the first, is to love our neighbor as ourselves, which I believe he refined into, love one another as I have loved you. And he said that the night before he was crucified. And on the same night, Jesus also talked about eternal life and said in John 17:3, eternal life is knowing you, Father, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. If I understand this right, this means that our heaven will be spent knowing God intimately. Let's try to get our minds around this for a moment. Jesus himself tells us that our first purpose in life is to love God intimately. And assuming we make it to heaven, our eternity will be spent knowing God intimately. The eternal face-to-face, as St. Therese puts it. So, Sister Emmanuel, could you share with us how important it is for you to have an intimate relationship with God, and why?
Yeah, it's the most important thing, because everything else you can do good works. You can spend your life serving. Those are all good. But the essences of why we were made, our very purpose is to know Him, to know God. And He wants us to know Him. He's so excited to reveal Himself of how good He is and how much He loves us. So those are things I would say I didn't know in the beginning of my religious vocation, more of as I went along, and as I would stumble and make mistakes, and He would reveal how much He loves me. It's okay. You're not perfect. I knew you weren't perfect when you entered, and it's okay. You're still not perfect and you're growing, but just like a constant confirmation that He still loves me when I make mistakes. And kind of something that I guess for myself was a renewal in my vocation was I was grateful to receive a new spiritual director who was trained in Ignatian spirituality, where he would lead me in prayer and give me something to pray about, and then give me a day to spend time in quiet prayer. I would have 4 hours of prayer a day. And then at the next day, he would review my prayer with me, like, how did you see God? What did He say to you? And then sometimes to say, let's talk to God right now, and ask me to say it out loud. And my prayer's so private, like, I'm not going to say this out loud, but it helped me to realize that God wants this conversation and He is listening. And when I had that encounter with God the Father, I had this image of myself in prayer as a little girl, and Him saying, I can hear you. I can hear you. Because I think sometimes we're praying, maybe we're saying a rosary or something, and it's like He's right here going, can I talk to you? And you're like, just a minute, I got to finish my prayer. So He's like, it's kind of like we treat God that way. We forget He's listening and there's a conversation He wants to have. So after I had that really powerful prayer experience, it just kind of changed how I prayed. And this priest taught me how to, when you have a prayer experience with Jesus, with God the Father or the Holy Spirit, to go back to it and keep drawing from it as much as you can. And that made my prayer life really deepen. It made it more alive. And I just thirst more for that conversation with Him. Yeah.
We're going to go back to that drawing from the same prayer, but we have to go to a break for a moment.
Okay.
Welcome back. So Sister, during the break again, you're suggesting about how to revisit your prayer so that you kind of relive that beautiful experience of being aware that God is not only hearing, but He desires to hear.
Yeah.
Could you?
Yeah, so I was just sharing that experience of, I saw myself as a little girl, and that God the Father was like right here.
This is what age now? How far are you?
I'm a sister. I'm professed. I'm finally professed. And just having a difficult time of feeling I'm working so hard in the mission. I'm going, but I'm crashing. Something's not fitting right. I'm not happy. And I have anxieties about maybe my work isn't enough. I'm not doing enough. There's more I need to do. And it was like in this moment, I just closed my eyes, and I was talking with my spiritual director, and he said, I just want you to tell God what are you experiencing? And it just came, I was like, I feel alone. I don't think you can hear me. And then I saw myself as a little girl. I was like, God the Father was right here, and He was saying, I can hear you. And it just instantly brought me comfort and peace and relief, because I knew He could see me. And as we were sharing in the break, I think that's one of the biggest lies of the enemy, is that we feel alone. We really believe we're alone. We think we are completely alone. People can't see us. They don't know us. They can't see us, and they don't care. But the truth is,
God is very distant and not so much caring.
And Jesus came to destroy that lie, that not only does He care, He came to be with us. He is Emmanuel. He is God with us. And so then for that prayer experience, what I was invited to do then is, the next day to go back to that place, to imagine myself right there again, to sit with that image and see if anything else draws from it. So it's like you have an orange and you're just squeezing the juice out of it every time as much as you can. And when there's no more fruit, then maybe you try another prayer or scripture or something, and until there's another image or another prayer, until there's something that you know so much, you're experiencing him that you know exactly where you were when it happened. Like I could tell you right where I was when I had that prayer experience. It's just so powerful.
So it's really a validation and an inspiration for going forward.
Yes.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
Just when you were saying, before you took your prayer to God, and so you feel so alone, was there kind of like a sense that you're relying, after an afterthought, or maybe it came to realize, maybe you realize you're relying too much on your own self-will?
Oh, definitely.
As opposed to, maybe living under grace that, as the Palatine says, the love of Christ impels me.
Yeah.
Now, that's a kind of new experience, because we think I know for myself, I've had an experience in life where I thought it was all about me, and I had the greatest heart, and I was doing it, and I almost crashed.
Yeah.
Because it's not about that. We don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
It's about, somehow learning to rely on God's grace and live by God's grace, and all of a sudden the energy just goes through the roof.
Yeah. And I definitely think at that time, I felt like I needed to make sure I was worrying too much what other people thought. Here they see this sister, there's all this work to be done, and they're going to see me do it. I'm going to do it, and then they're going to think really well of me, that I'm out there and I'm doing things. But if it isn't what he wants, then what is the point? So I had to kind of hit that wall of just going. So I was exhausted, physically exhausted. And then for him to say, I can see you, I can hear you, and what matters is what I think, not what anybody else thinks. And so that has taken a few years really to let that sink in, not worry about what people think. That's something everyone needs to hear, and you would think as a sister, like, I should know that, but no, it's something I still struggle with. And having that confidence in God the Father's love and his goodness, when someone knows that their daddy loves them, they can do anything, Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. I'm sure you covered it already, but could you just kind of reflect again on when your intimate relationship with God, you would say that really took off? And would you say that without that relationship, would you be a sister? Would you have this deeper spiritual life that you have right now? Could you kind of speak to that a little bit?
I think I could have floated along for a while, but I think I would have crashed. And I think what's beautiful about community's life is that the sisters, we strive to really build relationships with each other. And so my sister would be like, I don't know if you're happy, or like to have someone really walk with you to challenge you and just say, is this really what you want to do, or what's missing, or what is it that you think you need in your life to have time to reflect. And so that's been a gift, like the sisters that have become my just dearest friends, to help me walk and be honest with myself about what I'm feeling, and to encourage me if I need to get help, to seek help. So I think we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to look like we're weak. What
the interesting thing is, it's not that you had the wrong attitude when you were experiencing this. It's, I like to say, gotta learn to live by grace.
Yeah.
When I had my experience, doing it with noble intent and the whole all the good stuff.
Yeah.
But just knowing that it's not working, like after 3 years. Yeah. And I had to really park that. I parked it for 5 years. I said, God, I'm gonna, I'm not give you a break. I'm gonna disconnect in a sense at this deeper level until somehow, God thought, hey, wait a minute, it's not you doing it, You're doing it through me, or I'm doing it through you.
Yeah.
And then that's a total different reconnect, really. Yeah. And that's what I found is sustaining, I call it living by grace.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is, I think this is where the devil comes in, really. We try our best in the very good sense. Yeah. And like the devil is right there and said, I told you couldn't do it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. He said, well, forget it. I'm going to find something else,
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. How important is it for you to maintain intimacy with God? And how do you do so in the business of your day?
Well, it is very important. It's essential. When I first, actually kind of going back, so when I was first in Benke and I was first discerning my vocation, I had a prayer experience, not knowing even, I wasn't trained in spirituality, but I was in the church and I was praying before the Blessed Sacrament, and I really think it was God the Father's voice that said, you are to be to Jesus as Eve was to Adam. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I mean, it's taken me years to ponder that because it's still very clear. The words, it was God's voice, and to ponder what it meant to be to Jesus. That Jesus would desire a bride, a spouse, a helpmate, someone he could confide in, to be a friend to Jesus, that's close to Jesus. So that's something that I've taken along with me through the years of just, show me, Jesus, what you're meaning. Like, how can I be here for you, listen to you? We always ask you what we need, but Jesus, what do you need? And so that's been something that I try to grow in and just call it my spousal relationship with Jesus, of just being an available, attentive ear to him.
Well, that's interesting because we kind of learn that God doesn't have any need. God is all everything.
He is.
So how does that, what do you mean by?
Yeah, the thing is that Jesus, when we think about God, if we forget that Jesus was a person, we just think he's an idea, and ideas don't have mothers, and Jesus had a mother. So there's this reality of Jesus as a man, the God-man, that's real. He can touch, he can feel. When we see him face to face, we're going to see eyes, and he is one with God the Father. There's so much of a mystery in the Trinity, but that specific relationship with Jesus has been important in my prayer life.
And is it becoming clearer what his need of you is?
I think he reveals little things at different moments. Now it's more of just someone to receive, to listen, to listen attentively.
Guidance, wisdom, virtues.
That, but also just like to be a consoler of Jesus. To be, when Jesus was sad, like Our Lady would have consoled him. Or the heart of Jesus for his people, for all of mankind, and he loves to the point of death, but just that there's this realness of Jesus that I still long to know and to know more and to understand more. I'm still learning. I don't have all the answers, but it's a mystery that I try to really be present to. Yeah.
And that's our draw, in a sense. Love of Christ impels.
Yeah.
So we don't fully experience the love of Christ, but we do experience the impelling. Yeah, that's what we're saying, more or less. Trying to relate.
Hard to explain, yeah.
Prayer is difficult to relate to. Experience with God, I mean, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, and every person has a unique relationship with God. Your relationship with each person of the Trinity will be different than mine, and that will make us unique in heaven.
And it seems that God calls us to different things. You know? Yeah. Okay. We're gonna solve all of this in heaven, won't we? That's why it takes eternity.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You probably explained this already. What does intimacy with God look like? What would you say?
For myself, we have our set hours of prayer every day where we pray. In our convent, we have our adoration in the morning, so it's this hour of silent prayer before the Blessed Sacrament.
It's all community.
In our community, the sisters. And then we have our rosary, our midday we have mass, and then evening prayer, night prayer together. So, but on top of all that, although it sounds like so much, I always try to have a little bit more time set aside where I can have more of that contemplative experience, where I'll just try to, if I feel like the chapel's too noisy or people are walking by, I'll just go to my bedroom, shut the door, and then close my eyes and find a prayer experience where I experience Christ and just meditate on it. it's important to do because otherwise your day just goes too fast, and then it's gone, and
you find that you have to put this at a special time of the
to
day
make
or
time
a
for
specific time.
I try to leave work a little early, or if I have time during the day where I can set my work aside and just stop everything.
Oh, you could do that.
Yeah.
You could find that kind of time.
Try,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Early in the morning. I mean, you probably wake up early in the morning anyway.
I do. I'm up by
that's
5,
more for
but that's like
community.
my coffee and like to wake
That's more
up.
community prayer moment.
Yeah.
And there's always a need in your heart that says, look, God, I want a one-on-one with. I need a one-on-one.
I need some more. Yeah.
I need
for
a
me,
one-on-one
it's a call
with
to even more, and that's not for everybody. Everyone has different callings, but that's been for the last few years. It's been definitely a call.
Good.
For more.
All right. Now, can you tell us how important it is for everyone, not just sisters and priests, to have an intimate relationship with God? And can you suggest how you could start such a relationship? This is the man on the sidewalk here.
Yeah. No, it just starts with saying hi to God. If it's that simple, just hi. And then finding little moments that you start giving things back to Him. So if you're carrying your phone with you all day, put a little picture of Jesus on there. Just one simple movement that helps you remember He's there. It doesn't have to be much. If you don't want to show anybody that you're praying, keep something in your pocket, a little cross or a little picture somewhere, or if you're not afraid to express your faith publicly, say a prayer before your meal. Just little things. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be a week-long silent retreat. Just the little things of, hi God, I know you're there.
Does it have to start with a desire to have that kind of relationship with God?
Well, if you have the desire, He put it there. And He thinks that...
I know. He loves first, doesn't He?
Yes, He does. We think that we do that work, but
so we need to listen more to that desire, or how do we get there?
How do we get to listening?
Yep. If He's putting it there, we got to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would encourage people to just shut off the noise a little bit. Shut off your radio, shut off your phone, take your earbuds out, shut off the TV, stop watching the YouTube, and take a little bit of silence. Yeah. If you can, if you have the time.
Sure.
Yeah. Because He does, if it was just a world of priests and sisters, how boring. We're not just, we would look pretty silly if it was just us. The church is so big, and most of the church are laity. So there's this call that came from Vatican II of the holiness of the laity, universal call to holiness, and it's real. That means everybody's called to be a saint. Yeah.
Gotta listen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sister Emmanuel,
You're
Sister
welcome.
Mary Emmanuel.
Yes, you're welcome.
For sharing with us so personally your call on your spiritual journey. This has been Answering God's Call. Until we meet again, we fix our eyes on what is unseen. I'm Stanley Ermoff. God bless.